Hello, and welcome back to Factorio. I am Dorthek, and this is part 2 of our train tutorial mini-series. In our last episode, we discussed a number of things, including how to lay track, how to drive trains manually, how to place stations, and how to do signals. We talked about signals along a straightaway, where you want them separated by the length of your longest trains. We talked about intersections, both crossing, splits, and merges, and we discussed the general rule of thumb that you want a chain signal at the entrance to the intersection and before each subsequent crossing, and a regular signal at the exit of the intersection. Today we're going to talk about networks. How do we build networks that make the trains do useful things? So let's start with a very simple example. Suppose over here we have a station where the train is going to pick up some goods. Doesn't matter what those goods are, could be copper, could be iron, could be whatever. And over on the far side, we have a station that will deliver those goods. Okay, so the easiest way to make this work is to build a single rail line, have a two-directional train which can go to pick up and deliver, and then the train can go back and forth. It'll load, it'll get over here, it'll offload. When it's done, it will go back. Now, as we mentioned last time, in order for signals to work on a two-directional train, you have to have exactly the same signals across. So I put some down to break it up into blocks the length of each train. Although it's really not necessary here because we only have one train. There's nothing to interfere with. But now let's look at a more complicated use of a two-headed train. Let's say we have two resources. Over on this side of the map, we have a station where this blue train can pick up iron, and a train where this kind of reddish-orange train can pick up copper. And on the other side, we have copper delivery and iron delivery. Well, each of these trains works just fine by themselves. Let's hop into one and watch. So it's currently at pickup, it's loaded, it'll go over and deliver its goods. Okay, it has offloaded, now it can go back to pick up some more. Bringing iron ore or iron plates or whatever from the mines into our stations. And the same thing for the copper train. It loads up here, it then goes over and delivers whatever it needs to deliver. So far so good, but of course we're running them while not completely manually, we're triggering when the train's allowed to go. But we want it fully automatic. So how do we place our signals? Well, we have to be a little bit trickier because we have to think in terms of which directions are which trains coming in and how to place them. Now remember, you always have to have signals on opposite sides if you want two-directional travel, but you are allowed to have one of them be a chain signal and one of them be a regular signal depending on which way you're going. So let's consider. If I'm coming this way, if the copper train is coming up this way, then this is an intersection, and we want a chain signal on the entry and a regular signal on the exit. Right? Same thing for this train. Coming this way, we want a chain signal on the end, a chain signal on the entrance, and a regular signal at the exit. Now, you might say this is a exit merge. Why don't we just use chain signals here like we're allowed to? It's one of the exceptions we have. And while that's true in general, that does not work here with a two-directional merge because let me flip this train to manual and demonstrate it. If I drive this train to right here, it's clearly obstructing the exit block. But if we put a regular signal here, it would let this train in and not stop it until it's right here. Which means if this train was coming back, it would be stuck and we would have a deadlock. so we have to use a chain signal here. And on the other side, same thing. Let's take the train right over to the other side. So, as we're exiting the station, we want a chain signal before the intersection and a regular signal after. On the right side from the point of view of the train, which allows us to get back. But you'll notice we're suddenly getting no paths. Why? Well, everything through here is fine. It's green, it's green, it's green. But when we get here, we don't have a matching signal. So what should that matching signal be? Well, now we're looking at it from this direction. We're entering our merge here, so we want a chain signal. And we're exiting our merges here, so we want a regular signal. And now we can go back to here, and we can still not go to the other side because we didn't do it on the other side. So let's come over this way. Once again, we're coming from this side, so we want a chain signal there and regular signals there. Now the train can go in either direction perfectly happily. And in fact, if we remove the circuit conditions and let both trains run, oh, I misplaced this signal here. My bad. There. Now both trains can run without interfering with each other, without blocking anything. The problem is, as you can see, this train is waiting for the train to clear all the way across. And in fact, if we look at our blocks, this entire long stretch of trains is a single block. So can we break it up? And we say, well, our trains are 6 blocks long, therefore we should be able to place a pair of chain signals there. And the answer is we cannot. Because look what will happen. When the blue train was coming right to left, it entered the yellow block because the regular signal said it could. And when the copper train was coming left to right, it entered the cyan block. Now they didn't crash into each other, but we're at a complete deadlock because the copper train wants to go right, the iron train wants to go left. Let me manually send it back. And the reason for that is when you have more than one train using a using a single lane like that going in both directions, the common rail here has to be all one block, which means each train is completely blocking the entire path until it's clear. Now we can have more of these stations, that's fine. We can have 3, 4, 5 on this side, 3, 4, 5 on that side, doesn't matter. If we only have the one here, each train has to wait for it to be clear before it can use it. That makes this extremely inefficient, especially if the stations are far apart, because it's going to take a long time for the train to get through. This is why most of us do not use double-headed bidirectional trains like this. So what do we do instead? Well, instead, when we have long runs from a station to a destination, we use double tracks. So we will lay one track like so, and then we will lay a second track either 2 or 3 spaces away. There's a lot of discussion over which one is better. You can follow it on Reddit if you care to, but either way works. It's a question of what's more convenient to build. Now, what does that mean? That means we go in one direction on one side and the other direction on the other side. what I just built is what we call right-hand drive, which is where the trains go on the right side of the right side track. So if I have a train needs fuel. So I have this, if I have this train going this way, it's on the right side of the road, and if I was to have a train going the other way, it would again be on the right side of the road. Now, you can also build left-hand drive networks. They would look like this. Now, you would have to go this away and this away. Remember, that signal has to be on the right side of the train. These are absolutely equivalent. I tend to do right-hand drive because I live in the US and I'm used to driving on the right side of the road. A lot of people that live in England or Commonwealth countries prefer left-hand drive. The important thing is that you're consistent. Crossing from one to the other is a major pain in the neck. And also, if you're using someone else's blueprints, you want to make sure you pick the blueprints for the right system, because otherwise it will not work. All right, well, so we have these rails, and we have them set up for our trains. What do we do with them? How do we use them to actually have stops and starts and other useful things? Well, that requires us to build several useful junctions that we're going to design, analyze how to signal, and then reuse them from time to time. So, we have this two-way track here, and we want to exit the track to the south. How do we build this? Well, if we're coming left to right on this track, then we want to make a curve. Now, we could make this curve the tightest possible curve right there, but doing so proves problematic. We end up with not enough space for our signals. So we want the curve to actually be a little bit broader. So we will turn part way, then have a single straight rail, and then turn or two straight rails, and then turn the rest of the way in. This means that if we have a train right here, we can turn into this track. Okay, what if we're coming right to left? Well, same thing applies. Let's find the first straight piece and make part of the turn, go straight, and finish our turn. Okay, now, if we have a train, that's actually really broad. We don't need to make it that broad. There. Takes up a little bit less space. Now, if we have a train here, we can enter this as well. Note, by the way, that this is strictly a exit from the double track and enter whatever is down here. If we were to turn this train around and try to use this as an exit, we'd end up on the wrong side of the track. Not what we want. All right, so how do we signal this? Well, we just follow our basic rules. Anytime we exit the intersection, we use a regular rail signal. Before the intersection, before each encounter with another rail, before each crossing, we use a chain signal. So, what are our exits? Well, if you're going left to right and going straight, not taking this spur, then the exit is right here. Because if you're going right to left and not going in the spur, then the exit is right there. And if you're taking either of these and going down the spur, then the exit is right here. Okay, so far so good. Now, chain signals. Well, this is our entrance, and this is where we encounter the next piece. And it's blinking right now because this is still all one block. It will stop blinking the moment we put a few more signals in. And what if we're going straight? Well, we want a chain signal there just before we cross this. And now you'll notice it stopped blinking because now these are two different blocks. All right, so that's all of the possibilities from this direction. What about from this direction? Well, we want a chain there at the entrance. We want a chain there before we encounter this crossing. And we want a chain there before we encounter this merge. And this one is important because it separates this blue block from either the red or the cyan. That means that without it, a train that is stopped, here blocks this cross piece. So we definitely want it there to avoid that. Just as this one means that a train sitting right here doesn't block this crossing. Okay, so that's our exit from a double track. How do we enter the track? Let's say we have a line here, and we want our train to go up. Well, we want to be able to go up in either direction. So we do the same thing in reverse. Again, we can make this a very tight curve by doing this, but that won't leave us much space. So let's back up one space, half the curve, one straight, the other half of the curve. This allows us to exit to the right. And we want to do the same thing to be able to exit to the left. So grab the last one that's not the double, and we'll make the curve, go straight a little bit, and make the rest of the curve. No, we can do better than that. Go straight a little bit. There. Go. That should give us enough space for signals. If not, we will rearrange it. So again, where's our exits? Well, one exit is over here, if you're going to the right. The other exit is over here, going to the left. Those are our only two exits because this is an entrance. So, where do we want our chain signals? Well, depends on which way we're going. If we're going right to left, then we're entering it right here. If we're going left to right, then we're entering the intersection here, and we're encountering another train here. And if we're coming this way, then we're entering the intersection right there. We're encountering something right here. We're encountering something right here. I'd love to put it here, but there's not space, so it's got to go there. And finally, we're encountering it right here. Now, notice that these are exit merges. So technically, we could place that. We can do that. That'll work. I usually do chain signals just because. I also usually put this one here. I know it's tighter there, but I kind of like having them lined up. All right. So why do we care about these? Well, these are useful blocks for us to have. So we can make a copy of this and call this rail out, and put this as a blueprint in our inventory or our blueprint folder. And we can make a copy of this and call it rail in and put that in our folder as well. Now you may say, wait a minute, this is out, this is in. And that's true from the point of view of the tracks, but I tend to think of the point of view of the station. What station, you ask? Well, that's the next thing we want to do. Hey, look at that. This right here is a great place to put a station. Now, before, we frequently put our stations on the main line. But if we put a station here and there's a train stopped there, right? If we have this train loading or unloading or whatever at this station, we've just blocked the entire westbound line. Generally, we use these double-sided lines to move a lot of different trains to a lot of different places. So you never want to build a station right on the main line. You always want to take it off the line somehow, and this is one convenient way to do it. You have a in and an out, and again, I call them in and out from the point of view of the station, right? This junction gives me an into the station, this junction gives me an out from the station. And if I now do our regular signaling here, where's then we have a completed station on a 2-lane rail. Now, what if I want more than one station here? Well, that's actually really easy. We extend this a little bit, make this curve, take it out, out, out. Oh. And we have space for a second station. Now, at this point, though, we need to consider how we're signaling these intersections. Well, we use the same basic idea. We place a chain signal at the entrance, and we place a rail signal at the exit. Over here, instead of we place a chain signal at the entrance and a rail signal at the exit. However, there's a very, very important consideration here when we do that. This block here, this yellow block, this is our exit block for this junction. We need our exit block to be big enough for the train to fit completely. It's not, right? If we're using long trains, because this station is this is set up for like 6 long trains, that is not the case. So let's say we have this train at the station with a long line of cars. Right? And we have this train at the station with a long line of cars. Now we've got this train trying to get into one of these stations. And this train likewise has cars. No, that did not. Okay, so let's look at our signals right now. This is saying green because it's a regular signal and it's only looking at this block. So the train will be able to move into this block and it'll go to here where it hits a red signal. Well, look what happened. We're blocking the intersection. In fact, we're even blocking this yellow section. Especially if we had another car there, we're blocking this main line. Why did that happen? Well, because there's a third rule we have not made quite explicit enough yet. We said our 2 rules for intersections are chain blocks on the way in, chain signals on the way in and at each encounter with another rail, and rail blocks on the way out, and rail signals on the way out. But the second rule is that the block after that exiting chain signal has to be big enough to take the largest train we're going to use. So how do we fix that in this case? Well, there are 2 ways. Method 1, we replace this rail signal with a chain signal. Because now, this train here will get stopped all the way back here, right? Because this is blue, So it has to say, okay, well, which way am I going? I'm not going straight, I'm going left, and that's blocked. Well, that's fine. We're blocking this main line, but at least we're not blocking that line. The other solution is to make the exit block big enough. And we can make the exit block big enough by, let's remove the train. By taking this whole two-station setup and just putting it further away. Now, this block, after this next block, is more than big enough to hold the train, and it will not be a problem. And now the same thing, of course, occurs on this side. Right now, we're saying this is the exit for this station, and that's perfectly fine because a train can fit in this exit block. But if it couldn't, then we would need to use a chain signal there rather than a rail signal for the exact same reason. This is the more efficient solution, but it takes up a lot of space. You're not always going to have enough space to build a station this large. That's one of the problems with stations, is stations are big. And one of the few advantages of double-ended trains is that double-ended trains, stations are much smaller, right? All we needed to create a station was this one merge and the stop. And if we wanted to add another one, well, here we go. There's another one, right? We don't need this elaborate in and out. The downside is this main line has very low throughput, whereas here, while these trains are waiting at the station, you can have travel back and forth, and you can have multiple trains moving along this in the same directions at once. That's why we have these chain signals here breaking up the blocks to make sure that they can do that. And we can have this train being followed by this train. And as long as they're in different blocks, there's no problem at all. And they are, in fact, in different blocks. Well, almost. Now they're in different blocks, right? This one's in the red block, this one's in the yellow block. They're not interfering with each other, and they can both travel right to left, while other trains are traveling left to right. The only time we have interference is when trains are entering and exiting stations, which is why it's very important for this in and out to be properly signaled. Alright, let's take a look at one more important intersection type, and then we will call it for this episode. And in the next episode, we'll discuss the stations themselves, how to design them. So this other intersection that we want is a T. What if we want to go this way? Now, generally speaking, we want to go this way in all possible directions. So this requires some planning. So again, we want to leave a little bit of room, not make it as tight as possible. So half a turn, one space, other half a turn. Nope. We need to be one closer. Half a turn, one space. There's the other half turn. More than one space. Good enough. So coming from the right, this lets us get onto this track. Coming from the left, that lets us get onto lets us exit. Coming from the right, we need similarly that. Well, that looks familiar. That's basically this piece. But now we also want to make sure coming this way we can get into both lanes. So this should likewise look familiar. This, well, I made it lopsided. This is this exit. Let's make that nicer. That's still lopsided. Why is it lopsided? Because we started this track tour. There we go. All right. Fantastic. But now we have to signal this, and this is a much more complicated intersection to signal. The easiest thing to do is, again, identify the exits. Well, we're exiting to the south here. We're exiting straight across to the right here. And we're exiting straight across to the left there. That's our exits. Now let's look at our entrances and intersections. So, we do this one at a time. We're coming from the left and we're going straight. So we want that, that. We can't put one in here, so this is going to be kind of one block. And that. Don't worry about the fact that they're blinking for the moment. Now we're coming from the right. We're entering here. And we've got this encounter here. Now what if we're exiting? We're coming from the right and exiting. We've already got this one. We want that one. And coming from the left, we're exiting. We already have this one. We want that one. And we want that one. Okay, one more set of options. If we're coming from here and going to the right, well, this is where we enter the intersection. And this is where we encounter the next thing. And now coming up and going to the left, we've already got the entrance. I can't get one in any closer than this. And then that one. Now, as before, I'm going to just move this for position. The exit merges here and here and here. Could technically be regular signals, not chain signals, but I prefer them to be chain signal. I will also frequently move this one over here just to make it neat and symmetrical. It's technically slightly suboptimal, but I think it looks a lot nicer. And that's all of our merges. So now you can see that everything is broken up into blocks. This central blue block is kind of the key. That's the everything coming together, and it's one big block. It would be nice to be able to break it up, but to do that we would need a much bigger intersection. We could draw this intersection much larger and have, there's a curve, a long straightaway, and something like this. And like that, and now we can break up the signaling slightly better. And exit, 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 entrance this way, entrance this way, entrance this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, and from here, that, 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 that. I can't get one in here, so that. So now if we look, we can see that we don't have this big central intersection where both these lines and this line are interfacing. Instead, oh, I missed a signal there. Instead, we have that one blue one here is broken up into this cyan, this red, this yellow, and that's wrong. That one does not need to. No, that one does not need to be there. It needs to be there. This cyan, this yellow, and this red. And that's more efficient a little bit, but it's also much bigger. Generally speaking, for this, I would pick this left intersection. However, I will place them both in the blueprints, and I will make this blueprint library available to you. Let's just trim this a little bit. And this is small t, and this is, and again, I'm going to just move these around to be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Large T. And I will create a blueprint book for this tutorial. We'll call this train tutorial, and we will move that into here. And I will make this blueprint book available probably when the tutorial series is complete, so that you have all of them. Do note that this is built based on 1, 2, 3 spaces between. Many other blueprints that you'll find are built based on 2 spaces in between, and while the design and signaling are exactly the same, they are not compatible with each other because the ends will not line up. It's up to you which you prefer to use. This gives us more compact junctions and less space taken up. It makes it a little bit harder to signal because you have to spread things out more. There's a few other advantages to 3 that are not obvious yet, like being able to place more things in between. For example, one thing that you will see very commonly is people running power poles along their tracks. You can, large power poles. And with a 2 spacing, if you have a power pole there, you're kind of limited in terms of what else you can place. Let's say you want to defend your power line and you want to place some laser turrets. You can place 4, but that's about the limit of it. This is just a fake power supply from the Infinity mod so that we don't get the blink. However, if you're using this bigger spacing, then you can place a lot more turrets. So that's the sort of advantage with 3 versus 2. Less space, smaller intersections, but more difficult to signal and more limited what you can fit between tracks. Takes up a little bit more space, but easier to signal, and you can fit more between tracks. For this tutorial, I'm going to continue to work with the triple spacing. Many blueprints online are double spacing. Pick whichever one you like, or make your own. So, we've now covered 3 important junctions: an exit from the double track, an entrance, and a T-junction. And we've seen the first steps of how to put a station in place. We've also seen why double-headed trains, 2-directional trains, may not be a good idea. So with this, you should go ahead and try one of these yourself, see what you can do about laying out your own networks in your own games, and as always, don't forget to save.